We learned a lot about workplace culture in 2022. We saw quiet quitting. There was the whole move to hybrid work. We had companies saying, come back to the office, please. We saw companies saying, you must come back to the office. Come back to the office some of the time, never come back to the office, and everything in between. We saw 4-day working weeks, salary transparency experiments. We even saw the rise of employee tracking software. And of course, we saw Elon Musk. As the world of work rebalanced after the pandemic, we saw companies grappling with a shift in employee power. There was volatile economic conditions and then this changing expectations of how people wanted to work, where they wanted to work from, and also who they wanted to work for as well. With the economic climate as it is at the start of 2023, we're seeing leaders prioritize culture above all else. So with that in mind, here are my top 4 workplace culture trends to look out for in 2023. The first is the role of the leader. Now, culture always starts at the top, and it's no different in 2023. There are 2 parts to this one. The first is how leaders manage their decision-making process. Now, when faced with uncertainty and risk, the natural instinct is to cut costs, cut expenses, headcount freeze, etc. Now, that might be the right decision, but always check your bias in that decision-making process and have good people around you to help you navigate those decisions. Secondly, communicate like you've never communicated before. When you're faced with a lot of uncertainty, what will absolutely be happening in the organization is gossip and rumor mill. And that will increase and increase the longer there's uncertainty and there's no clarity coming from the leader. If you feel concerned or uncertain as a leader, times that by 10 and that's how your people are feeling, because they don't have what you have, which is control over their future at that place of work. So how you respond publicly will have a disproportionate effect on how people feel in your company. People will be looking to their leaders like they've never done before in 2023. There's so much uncertainty, so much unprecedented things happening in the world that the role of the leader will be to give some calm and confidence and clarity to their people. If you look at the example of Meta, they had a really bad year in 2022 for a host of reasons, one of which being the significant cuts they had to make in their workforce. But even at that point, if you look at the early reports in January, the workforce still has confidence in Mark Zuckerberg. They still back him to make the right decisions for the company for now and in the short term and for the future as well. The second big trend is this will be the year that meetings change. In 2022, we saw the world of work react to the pandemic and people coming back to the office, working from home, and then this whole industry that grew around the world of hybrid. The result of that was a big shift and change in how meetings happened in organizations. One of the big things we all felt last year was this big shift and increase in the number of meetings we all had at work. Data has shown that the number of meetings we experience at work has increased by 60% since the pandemic. That means that if you were having 30 meetings per week before the pandemic, last year that number would have gone up to 48 meetings per week. The length of meetings has changed as well. Typically, they've got a lot shorter as we're trying to cram more in, and they've shrunk by about 25%. The other big change we all felt over the last 12 months has been the rise of this hybrid meeting, as we have some people remotely, some people in the office, and then people running those meetings trying to work out how to make that a good experience for people. So for 2023, I think we'll see a big focus on meetings. Partly because the employee experience is going to be increasingly important to building a great culture for your people. But equally, organizations will be looking to save costs and increase efficiencies. And meetings are nothing but usually very ineffective and inefficient. So that will be an area, I'm sure, where organizations will say, right, there's some opportunities here to make our employee experience better and to reduce cost. So I think there'll be a real increase in focus on that meeting experience in 2023. Third trend is the rise of asynchronous communication and the impact that has on culture. So if you're not familiar, asynchronous communication is just communication that doesn't happen in real time. Things like email, chat, etc. are all examples of asynchronous communication. Synchronous communication is when people can communicate in real time. So video calls, in-person meetings, etc. Asynchronous communication has grown massively since the pandemic, as we've all shifted to hybrid work. We have more technology deployed at pace that enabled chat, so Slack, Microsoft Teams, etc. And that grew throughout the pandemic and continued in 2022. We've got many more meetings in our calendars now. So the opportunity to do work and collaborate with people at the same time has reduced. And therefore, asynchronous communication has risen sometimes during those meetings while they're happening, and oftentimes outside of that, outside of work hours typically as well. At the same time, there's been this weird culture shift where people aren't calling each other anymore. Those ad hoc, I'll just pick up the phone and give somebody a call instances just aren't happening with the same frequency. And that shift has gone to asynchronous communication. Now, there are lots of positives and negatives when it comes to this form of communication. But my advice when you think about this for 2023 and how asynchronous communication will definitely be happening more in your organization over the next 12 months is, firstly, manage your culture around this communication. For example, when a leader sends a message at 6 o'clock in the evening, then the expectation from the people receiving that will probably be that they need to respond at that time. So just make sure it's really clear as we get used to these asynchronous communication platforms like chat, that the expectation within the organization is still to get that really good, healthy balance on work life. The next one is notifications. Everybody in your company will be using some form of communication or productivity platform. And in that platform, there will be some kind of settings to protect your people against the notifications barrage that they'll be experiencing every single day. Asynchronous communication is all about being able to communicate on your terms, not responding in real time with the other person. But the danger of things like Microsoft Teams chat or other platforms like Slack is that once a message is sent and read, the experience and the expectation from that recipient might be, well, I need to reply straight away, especially if there's some seniority or authority involved in that transaction. So help your people to protect their work environment and use the settings in those platforms to make sure they've got a really good balance of work and life that protects their mental health. The third one is a bit more tricky, and this is the communication style. As you move away from in-person and real-time communication and you move to text-based asynchronous chat, the opportunity for miscommunication grows exponentially. We've all experienced this, whether it's in our personal lives on WhatsApp or in a work environment on things like Slack or Teams chat or other platforms. You can misunderstand somebody so easily and so quickly. And as we read a text message, we often as humans build a picture in our minds of what we think that other person means, the tone that they take, the way that they've said something or not said something in that message. And we build a whole narrative in our minds as we read that text. And because there's no ability to, in real time, question or ask or see facial expressions as the thing is being said, the opportunity for miscommunication is massive. So it's a harder one to know how to manage as a strategy, but at the very least, create the awareness of the issue and help people become more self-aware of how they communicate and how that could be interpreted by somebody else. A good culture of psychological safety will help at this point as well. The fourth one is the employee experience. Now, we saw things like quiet quitting, the great reshuffle, the great resignation, all of these terms being used over the last year or two. And what that's led to now is this situation where the balance of power has shifted more towards the employee, and therefore the employee experience being a real strategy that companies are working on now and in the future. The reason they're working on it is because with a great employee experience, you get much better engagement. That means the employee is much more invested in the work that they're doing and in the company's direction as well. That helps with things like productivity, staff retention, talent retention, etc. Now, there's a lot that sits under employee experience. Diversity and inclusion. Do I feel represented here? Am I able to turn up as myself? Will I be included? Especially when we've got this hybrid work dynamic to work around. Your mental health and your well-being, this growing trend of companies really understanding how people have been impacted mentally by the pandemic and all the pressures of work and that changing world of work over the last few years, that continues now. And as people become more aware and educated in this area and able to speak up about it, then the importance of this just grows. So I see this trend of particularly mental health and well-being within the employee experience portfolio just growing over the next 12 months. Onboarding needs to be reimagined. How do you make that brilliant experience for a new person coming into your company when you've got some kind of new hybrid or remote only work experience happening? The technology is going to be critical here in the employee experience. Make it work, make it simple, and provide guidance. One of the big faults I saw in companies over the last 12 months was the assumption that people knew how to use tech. Yes, they all had to use Zoom or something during the pandemic, but just because they learned how to use that one particular platform in the one particular way that their company did at that time under crisis does not make them digitally competent necessarily, especially if they're using different technology in your organization. So really think about a great onboarding experience that helps them navigate this world of technology that they'll have to use in their work. Rethinking the office is another big one, and that trend will continue. One of the best articles I read last year was think about how you make your office experience for your people like them being a guest in a hotel and treat it like that. We saw lots of mandates last year. You must come into the office 3 days a week. You must come in on Wednesdays and Thursdays, all those different things. And if you mandate, then you're probably not prioritizing the employee experience. And the worst impact of that were when we saw people going into the office and sat on Zoom calls all day. That's when you know it's not working. So if you're going to use the office as a cultural tool, which is basically what it is now, I think, then really think about how you make that experience great for your people. Doesn't necessarily mean pool tables and swings and things like that, although there are great benefits to having those types of things that encourage people to come together in a non-work context when they meet up. But it does mean really thinking deliberately and intentionally, what do you want it to feel like for your people when they meet each other at your office? And what kind of things do you want that to enable to happen? Psychological safety is a big part of the employee experience. Imagine coming into a new company and in that first meeting, you see one of your peers challenging the boss on a decision the boss has made in that room. And as that's happening, the boss thanking the employee for that contribution and saying, great work, I want to see more of that. As a new person witnessing that, you're witnessing psychological safety in action. And that's really powerful. So, not just for the new people, of course, psychological safety is important for any organization's culture, especially if you're looking to build a high performance culture. But that will be an increasing trend in my mind for the employee experience in 2023. So thank you for watching. I would love to know your opinion. So please feel free to comment and share your own ideas, experiences, and what you're seeing as big trends in workplace culture happening over the next 12 months. And of course, please like and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you.